What's up, everybody? I am Levi Brickley, your host with the Pursuing Truth podcast, and this is another episode of Boundaries. We're going to be talking about the 4 character traits with my mother, Kim Maddern. This is the 3rd episode. Mom, how have you been?
I've been good.
It's good.
I think.
Yeah? Have you heard anything on the last episodes?
A couple people's asked me some questions.
It's good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I hope that people are really getting something from this series, because the most important thing is that you guys learn to establish boundaries. And I know that, especially reading this last chapter, it really kind of worked on me to examine myself and how I fit into these 4 different character traits. I want to make sure that we cover that you guys need to go follow the Instagram, Facebook page, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, leave a review there. This is huge, okay? Because this is what's going to grow the platform and get people to hear these really good messages that Mom and I have, especially about boundaries.
I realized, even reading the book again, that I still struggle with stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I started picking up things I remember, you know.
So you haven't perfected life over your 67 years. Is it 60? Are you 67?
No, not yet.
I can never get it right.
I still have another 8 months, maybe, before 67. But no, I mean, I don't think you ever quit growing. I don't care how old you are. I think sometimes you regress and sometimes you grow and then you regress again. I just think it's ebb and flow all the time.
Yeah, I thought I'd be like perfect by 40 at this
No,
rate.
that ain't going to happen.
Dang it.
I think 40 is when I finally started even knowing who I was. So.
I think I started knowing who I was at 26.
Good for you.
Yeah. Okay, the first one.
Yes. The first one.
The very first one is compliance.
Yes.
The one that is always compliant with their surroundings, with the relationship. They ask you, you want to go to Taco Bell tonight when you really want to go to Taco Shop. Being able to say, no, I don't want to go to Taco Shop.
Right.
But even on a deeper level, I mean, you think of some of these things, just for example, as being able to say, no, I disagree. I will not. I choose not to. Stop that. It hurts. It's wrong. That's bad. I don't like that you touch me there.
Right. And I think it starts with the little things, though. It does start with the fact that you can't say, I don't like Taco Bell. I want to go to Taco Shop. I think it starts there.
Right.
And you soon start giving into more and more things that are more and more on a deeper level. Mm-hmm. That can actually do some harm.
And that's what the book got into as well, is like being able to say no on the Taco Bell, for instance. Yeah. And how that's like the easiest thing to say no to. Right. And then allowing yourself to get to the point where you're going to say no to the big things. Like maybe it's your husband that says, hey, I want to buy a new house. And maybe you need to put your foot down and say, no, babe, we're not buying the new house.
Or let's talk about it.
Yeah. Let's have some serious communication about this.
Well, even going back to the simple little things, how often do you ask your girlfriend when you take her out, or going to take her out to eat, and say, what would you like? And she goes, oh, I don't care. And then you pick something, and she goes, well, I don't really want to go there. And you're like, well, why can't you just tell me where you want to go in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. Just open up and tell me exactly what you want. But, I haven't experienced that for a long time.
You haven't?
No. Yeah. It's like just the first date thing where I think it's harder to say no because you're excited to meet one another for the first time, True. You want to please them. Yeah. And I think sometimes that could be an error of your way. Because if you're with somebody, say, that's a controller, we're not there yet, but when you're with somebody that's a little bit more aggressive and stuff, that's a gateway to them. That, she's going to do what I want. Yeah. Or he's going to do what I want. Yeah. So I think that it starts with little things and it grows to bigger things. So we're here to talk more about the bigger things that can happen by not knowing how to say no. Right. But that's the establishment of the first thing, because what will often happen is somebody will get complacent in saying no. It's because if I say no, there's like this innate fear in me that this person may not like me after I say no, or this person may not want to be part of the relationship with me. And I really think that the establishment of boundaries really starts at a fear point of where will this lead if I do say, no, I don't like that. No, I don't want that.
Right.
And why is this in our culture? Is it we have to agree? And I think this is what the book gets into. And again, guys, this is based off of Boundaries by Cloud Townsend. Had to think about that for just a sec. But that's one thing that it gets into is like, as a child, getting a child to be able to say, no, I don't like that. Because as they get into their adolescence, then maybe they're presented with different types of peer pressure. And that's establishing their life right there. Is in their adolescence, are they going to be able to say no? Like in my in our first episode of Boundaries, one of the things that I talked about was, I was around all of these friends, and we were smoking weed and drinking and partying and all of these things. And what it allowed in my life was to be exposed to harder drugs. Right. And fortunately, I had those boundaries established where I said, I'm not going down that road. And so the child, it's so important to raise your children with saying no. What would be your advice to parents teaching their children to say no?
Well, I think in my first 4 kids, I didn't have a clue. And I think that I was so dogmatic, per se, to make sure that my children mind. So I didn't give them room to have an opinion, really. When mom says no, I meant no. And I don't want nothing coming back. I think with you 3 younger kids, because of your dad being an alcoholic, I still knew it was important that you guys still respected him and had a love for him. But I also needed to teach you it's okay to have a boundary when it didn't feel good, that you can leave his presence or tell him on the phone, I'm going to hang up now. I knew you guys had to have that ability in order for you not to become controlled by his emotions or the way, because he had the ability to interject guilt sentences, and things like that. So I think that's when I started allowing you kids to be able to express when you didn't really agree with me. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe initially when I was mad and I said no or something, but I feel there was times we were able to come back to the table and talk about it. And a lot of times I would have to leave the decision up to you kids to make, because I knew it was better for you to be able to make a decision, learn by that, whether it be good or bad, than for me to constantly control your choices. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I know that this is very subjective, as in, like, all children are different. Mm-hmm. But you having an experience with 7 of them, right. What do you think is that age where you start incorporating kind of a little bit more of their free will and being able to say no? Because, like, like toddler age, like the toddler's going to go with kind of just whatever comes.
We're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, because this is actually the next chapter is teaching children about boundaries and stuff. But it all comes from the family you're in and learning that. I personally think as soon as they can start talking, let them experience, like, when a kid's throwing a tantrum, for one. Our first reaction as a parent is, you better stop that, I'm going to beat your bottom.
Yeah.
Or you better straighten up. Which you yourself had issues with tantrums, if you remember them.
Yep.
And what would I say to you when you started having a little tantrum?
You would say, well, you're going to clean that up, because my anger.
First, I sent you to your room. I said, you need to go to your room and get control of yourself.
Yeah.
You would go to your room and literally destroy your room. Destroy his room. Pull the mattress off the bed. Things came off the wall. You destroyed your room. And then
is that like onset to like self-destruction?
No, I think it was your frustration, whatever you were dealing with. And I knew that the only thing in your room was your stuff. Mm. So if you broke it, it's your stuff.
Yeah.
So, but what was my comment when you decided to come out of your room?
You're going to clean it up.
That's your room. You're going to clean it up. But 9 times out of 10, when you came out of your room, you had gathered yourself.
Yeah.
And we could talk about what was wrong.
Yeah.
You can't talk to a child in what's going on with his emotions in the heat of the moment. You have to give your kids time out to cool down, gather their thoughts, and then come back in and engage with them and say, so what's going on?
Yeah.
Why were you upset? And sometimes they don't know.
And the struggle with the compliant person is that oftentimes they blend in with their surroundings.
True.
Like a chameleon, where Proverbs 4:23 says to guard our hearts.
Right. And I was very guilty of not being able to do that.
What do you mean?
Well, in my younger years, even though I professed Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, I still had the party girl side where I would be out with friends.
You partied?
I did after I was 30.
I've never heard about this.
Well, I was really rebellious after my first marriage fell apart, to be honest with you. I was mad at God, for one, because I thought, I'm married and married for life, and things didn't go the way I thought they should go. But I was very compliant during all that time. Like, of course, you have to understand, my dad was borderline abusive, very controlling. I married someone that was kind of manipulated some, and I just really never felt I had a voice. And that turned into inward turmoil, which came out expressing in anger, because I didn't know how to do that. And I remember after the divorce, I was like, bottom line, to hell with it. I tried being a Christian. Now I'm going to do the wild side. And so I went partying, but yet I still kept this like dual personality. When I was around my Christian friends or the family that were Christian, then I was a good girl. And then when I was out nightclubbing, I was the bad girl.
You met Dad at a nightclub.
I did.
So you were in the middle of that stage when you met Dad.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Like I said, I've never heard about any of this. Why? So what you're saying is like, because you started building a family like very young.
Yes.
And so when you got to like 30 years old and the 4 older kids, I think Brock would have probably been 10, 11 years old at the time.
Correct.
And you got to this point where, this is like your first ounce of freedom absent of a man being there, the kid's father. And so, like, what made you want to go out and be rebellious? Was it just like, finally I'm free, or was it kind of an escape, or what was it?
Well, I think, as a young child, there wasn't a lot of structure in my life. I can remember my earliest memories of my mom and dad were fighting all the time, and we were running to the next door neighbors to hide out or something, and then when they got a divorce, things got even more chaotic. I went from one house to another house until we were in foster care, and my dad came to get me. And my dad was still very angry, even though he'd become a Christian. But he had such a tight rein on me. I mean, from the way I dressed to my friends, and I felt like he purposely moved 10 miles out in the middle of nowhere in the country so I can't run around with kids in town. He pretty much controlled my whole life. So I don't really feel like I had any freedom to express who I was or even to know who I was. And then I met my first husband when I was 15. And all of a sudden my world again falls apart because my dad decides I don't want to live here no more. And so he let me get married. So I was barely 2 weeks. I was 17.
You were 17 when you got married?
Yes, by 2 weeks.
Different world.
Yeah. By 2 weeks. I was still in high school, and so I moved from Dad's house, who was very controlling and stuff, into being married and becoming very compliant because I just wanted everything to be happy. I didn't want the fighting that I grew up in, and I didn't want the turmoil that I always felt. So it was easier just to say yes to everything that he wanted to do, and still didn't have a voice of my own. So I think when I hit that 30 years and our marriage fell apart, I was like...
So when you were struggling saying no at the beginning of the marriage, a lot of that had to do with the fear of
being abandoned again,
or experiencing the same things that you experienced as a child.
Like we talked about, one of the things was like, don't touch me there. I mean, it's easy to say I disagree. It's easy to say I know, but don't touch me there. What's that mean? Well, most people automatically assume that means a sexual thing. And my dad had a tendency, and I know to him it wasn't sexual abuse, but he would embarrass me by groping me, or he would touch me in places that were not appropriate. And so when I married, he would kind of do some of the same things my dad did, like come up behind me and grope me. And it would just infuriate me. I'd kind of go off. Well, what happened is that we went to church to the pastor of the church, and when we were getting some marriage counseling, and I told the marriage counselor that I didn't like that he touched me like that because my dad did it. And this is what this pastor said to me. He says, well, you need to learn to define the difference between your husband and your father. So right there was even another stab to myself as not being able to have boundaries with a man and be able to say to a man, I don't like to be touched like that, and him having the respect to hear me and not do that. And really what it did was gave him a license to think he could continue doing what he wanted to do. And it grew into, and what really dissolved the marriage is that he had a pornography problem, and he didn't see anything wrong with watching his pornography in the living room on the TV where I can hear him, and then come to the bedroom.
Husband or dad?
First husband.
Okay.
So my boundaries were always crossed, and I never knew anything about how to set them up or how to be able to say it's okay to say I don't like this.
And as a child, like, you weren't taught then how to establish the boundaries then.
No.
Because you came from the broken home. Essentially, when did Grandma and Grandpa split up?
I was 8, I believe.
Okay. And you're the middle child?
I'm the third.
The third. Okay. And all those things, I mean, you can the time doesn't matter in those things.
No.
Like the problem within culture then didn't affect that. There were differences, of course. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that we're still dealing with issues within the homes. We're still dealing with issues within relationships.
Right.
And for us to think, oh, well, that was the 1970s. It was a different time. Is it blah, 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 blah? That doesn't matter, because you're dealing with emotions that's part of human nature at the time, too.
Well, and I think it's just an innate thing. I mean, we've already established that God created boundaries.
Yeah.
Each person in the Trinity had their own responsibilities and their own duties and stuff. It's always been there.
Right.
It's always been there. But, I think like during the 50s and 60s, just the evolving of time and people and the ability to think for themselves and do things for themselves, we don't talk about these things until it's a problem.
Yeah.
And why are we not talking about these things before it becomes a problem?
Yeah.
We wait until it's a problem. So in being a chameleon, compliant, I spent the majority of my life complying. Like it talks about in the book, it talks about part of the complying is always doing more than what we should, taking on more responsibility. And I remember all through that time, I did anything that would please people because I seen that if I pleased them, then I felt some kind of love, even though it was a wrong kind of love. Yeah. But I felt acceptance. I felt like I was appreciated and stuff, and I never had those feelings. So I found like the more I did, the more I poured myself out to people and doing things. It was just almost the opposite of where I should have been, with good boundaries. It was bad boundaries too, because I was still not taking in good.
Well, and I think too, the result of that, and I think that this is the reason why a lot of relationships fail, is that not establishing the boundary doesn't lead to you being respected.
Exactly.
And that's what we all ultimately desire, especially as a man.
Yes.
As a man, in order for me to feel loved, I have to feel respected.
Yes.
And in your relationships, like, if you don't establish it in the beginning, then it's going to be much harder for you later on to get the respect on establishing that boundary. No, don't touch me there. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there. From the simplest to the deepest things about the decisions that we make in relationships.
I'll tell you the first time that I really a aha moment for me in establishing a boundary. And this is after even your dad and I had divorced. I mean, it took me that long before I really started learning to actually. Of course, like I said, I didn't read the book until after I got divorced from your dad. So,
right.
But anyway, I remember. I don't know if you remember a gentleman that I was we weren't really dating. We just hung out, and he had a couple of kids.
A situationship.
Yes. Anyway, we were going to go to the theater. And we get to the theater, and in my mind, I already knew what we were going to watch. And he says, well, I'm going to get a ticket to go see this. And it was the first time I actually stood up and said, well, me and my kids aren't going to go see that. Because it was an appropriate movie for you. For me, from my opinion, it was not an appropriate movie for you.
What movie was it?
I don't even remember. I just remember I stood up to somebody and said, no, that's not appropriate for us, so we're not going. And lo and behold, he went on my side and took
so it's not like whatever situationship you had going on there just ended. Did that affect it long term where like you were going to be respected later on from even something as simple as that?
Well, I realized, and I know that sounds really crazy when I think about it. I just realized at that moment that I had a voice and my voice means something, and he respected it.
Yeah.
I think that's what blew me away too, is that he even respected it. He heard it.
Yeah.
And
did you, so when you said no, you explained it like, that's not what me and my kids are going to see.
Right. And I explained to him why I wasn't going to see that movie.
And I think that right there is crucial.
Yes.
You don't just say no just without any reason or purpose or rhyme or reason. You say no because of a specific reason.
Yes. Whether it be a conviction spiritually or if it's something from your past, you just don't want to open that door again and stuff. I mean, I think that's part of the communication. If you want to set good boundaries, then learn how to communicate them.
Yeah. But also you're setting the boundaries for us kids too.
Yes.
On these movies. Like I don't want them to watch this movie because it wouldn't be good for them.
Right. Well, even here's another controversial thing. When Harry Potter came out.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I never watched Harry Potter.
Okay. So I didn't take my kids to the theater to see them, and I remember being at work. And some of the women at the workplace, were talking about it and said, are you taking your kids to see them? And I said, no, I'm not taking my kids to see them. And they said, oh, no, why not? And I was able to tell them what my convictions was about that, and those were the times where I felt really good about myself, that I was able to tell them why. And it was my opinion. I wasn't telling them that they were wrong or not right to take theirs. Just for me and my house, we weren't going to go see it.
And so I think something you can take away from this is that you're not willing to sacrifice your spirituality or what you feel on your heart, but you're still being compassionate in a way that you're still explaining the truth behind why you're saying no. Well,
it goes back to that. Remember in our first episode or so that I talked about that you have to really learn to use that I feel this way when this situation happens. Mm-hmm. I feel for my children, it was not a good thing.
Yeah.
And I would explain to them, I believe, this is just where I believe that Satan used anything that he can to get into, infiltrate into our young people and our kids and adults and stuff like that. And at that time, there was an incident in my own personal family, with my mom and my sister about getting their palms read and stuff. And it, for a better word, my mom lived by what that person told her. And I think it also played a part in some of the decisions she made in her life because of that particular thing. So witchcraft to me, or anything that was on the dark side like that, I didn't feel like until you kids were of an age to understand the reality of it all and where it can be very evil and where it could just be entertainment, I wasn't going to introduce you to it.
I think that's interesting. You know, Halloween is 2 weeks out. Mm-hmm. Even as a kid, I don't ever remember you allowing us to dress in like certain things that were like, you weren't able to be a demon or whatever. You weren't able to dress that way.
I didn't want you to dress anything dark. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. I think still my favorite costume ever, which you made me, was the Neo from The Matrix.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that? Yeah. I had the robe and everything.
Yeah, everything. But that was just my personal conviction. I didn't put that on anybody else, and I didn't judge anybody else for doing whatever that was theirs to do. And I think that's where boundaries comes in. And even in today's society, part of having boundaries is setting a foundation of what your no is and what your yes is. Mm-hmm. And stick to it. Don't back down just because somebody wants to bully you into that.
Or even just the bullying, like fitting into culture.
Yes.
And I think that's what a lot of people really struggle with. Like me, I would be the same way with the kids. Like, no, we're not watching that. We're not doing this. Because, again, comes back to that Proverbs 4:23 verse of guarding the heart. Why allow that in? As a Christian, why allow that in? It's not that like everybody should live this way, but it's things that we should be thinking about in the guarding of our hearts. Let's move on, though, to type number 2. This is the type of person that is avoidant. And I think reading the book, this is the one that really kind of spoke to me, because I was avoidant in bringing up the conversations in relationships that I knew could potentially lead to that relationship ending, because I wasn't ready to effectively communicate the problems that I was feeling inside of me.
Right. Well, and I think also avoidance is, I like to call it as picking your battles.
Yeah.
Because we can get way off base here in the things that we say, like a total avoidance. There are some things that, why bother? Is it really worth the fight?
Yeah.
And I do that now, is it really worth the argument, or do I just ignore it? And you have to decide where that line is drawn. But I think a lot of times, I could see where you're avoidance because you don't want to. And I think that's a man thing, too. It's hard for men to express what their emotions are, what's going on with their emotions, because they certainly don't want to feel like they're weak. So, it's like they avoid really expressing that. So they just avoid the whole thing.
Yeah. On the emotional side, I have a dog barking in the background, and I'm sorry because we're really on point, and I'm not even going to edit that out. I just want you guys to know I'm acknowledging that the dog is barking in the background. But, the emotional side is a lot more difficult for me to open up about. Whereas, a logical thing, like let's say like a political stance or a religious stance, for me is a lot easier to say, no, I disagree with that. But emotionally, I'm experiencing maybe anger, sadness, something like that. It's really hard for me to peel back the layers of my heart to allow that in, because what I'm really doing is I'm making myself vulnerable to judgment, vulnerable to the potential of an ending, like I said, or anything along those lines. And I want to be open. It's important that us men are open emotionally. Right.
And I do think that there's a difference in gender in that. I hate to say that, but I just think innately men aren't very in tune to their emotions. They know they're there. Yeah. They just don't like to examine them and then, heaven forbid, express them.
Yeah.
It can go on the side of if you're in an abusive relationship, you're going to avoid any kind of confrontation. So you won't speak up and exercise boundaries because of the threat of physical violence sometimes.
Yeah. And I think the result with that, it leads to resentment and bitterness.
Yes.
And I see it a lot now. Like I talk to women, and a lot of women feel that they can't trust men because of their experience with one man. And that it's almost like she individually has become bitter or resentful towards men, even though she wants a good man.
Right. Right.
And I think that's the role us men need to play, is to reassure as good men. Mm-hmm. I always say there's two types of guys, two types of men. There's the nice guy, there's the good man. The nice guy presents himself as a good guy at the beginning, and then over time kind of develops into taking control of the relationship and not working with you in the relationship. The other guy is actually a good man where he's intentional with you. He works with you. He loves you. He wants to be with you, and he wants to make things work with you. So those moments of the avoidance of me not talking about things, a good man opens up. Right. And I think I had to go through a bunch of failures in relationships to understand that about me, is that, like, if I'm with somebody, I'm 100% there with them. Mentally, emotionally, physically, everything. Whatever it calls me to be in that relationship, it's my role in the relationship to be sacrificial and allow myself to open up. That way it doesn't lead to the bitterness and anger within the relationship.
Right. But if you are, whether it's a relationship, friendship, or anything, but if you're with someone that's already been damaged, it's very difficult for them to open up. Avoidant people will almost impossible to get them to be acceptive, even of God. I mean, they struggle. And I am the compliant avoidant person more than the control one, because my avoidance was, it was easier just to go along with people than to ruffle the feathers, simply because of fear of rejection more than anything else. Mm-hmm. And I was people pleasing because of it, not that I didn't get some joy out of doing things for people, but to the compliance of not really being able to express my own emotional tie in that, and being able to be honest with people. Yeah.
And that hits on the next point, is opening up that gate to God. Yeah. God allows us the free will to allow him into relationships.
But see, I went, 42 years? Well, I became a Christian when I was 15 years old. And because of my childhood and stuff, I wasn't accepting of people's love. I can love people, did pretty good at loving people, but I didn't allow them to love me. Yeah. And part of that went into not allowing God to love me. I understood that he died on the cross for my sins and he's forgiven me, but I struggled with how he could love me.
And I think that it's important to hit on there that it's one thing to know something. It's another thing to accept it. Right. And you can know that Jesus died on the cross for you, but do you accept him? Right. And the acceptance of him is complete vulnerability, because you're opening yourself up to.
And saying, I am a screw up.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have it all together.
I don't have it together. Just quit stepping in my pile of crap, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, when it was transforming to me. Mm-hmm. That moment that I go, he does love me. He truly loves me. And that was transforming to me. Yeah. And I really think that was probably the first time in my life I actually opened it. Opened my heart.
When was that?
I was right at around 42 years old, and it was during that journey time. Yeah. And it was actually through a book called Signature of Jesus by Brennan Manning. And the way Brennan Manning wrote that book and how Christ loves you, I don't know, it just spoke to me. Even though I'd read scripture, for God so loved the world,
that he gave his only begotten son.
Yeah, and stuff. And conceptually, I understood that. But in my heart, I didn't. Yeah. But that's because I had no boundaries growing up. There was no boundaries in my life. I didn't know how to open. That was one of those things we talked about last week about opening the gate. You got to open the gate to allow the good in. Yeah. Yes, you should let the bad out, but you got to let the good in. If you don't let the good in.
Like we should enjoy the safe relationships.
Yes.
And recognize the destructive ones.
Right. And that is the problem with not having correct boundaries, is that you don't, not only do you allow the bad in, you don't even recognize the bad when it comes.
Yeah, you can't differentiate between the good and the bad.
Right.
So yeah, naturally you're going to be a little bit fearful of the outcome of any relationship at that point. Like you should be looking at and examining, where do I need to establish my boundaries to prevent myself from being hurt? That way I recognize the destructive ones and I can appreciate the good ones and be 100% in tune with the good relationships.
Right. There's a saying, about, what the definition of insanity is.
Levi?
No. It's when you keep doing the same thing over and over again, but you're expecting a different result. Yeah. And I think of that about my relationships with men in general. I kept doing the same thing over and over again, expecting something good to come out of it.
Yeah.
And it didn't. And so it's frustrating now to think I wasted a lot of years. And that I didn't really teach, all of you kids a good set of boundaries.
Yeah, but you're a person too. You're growing. This goes for any single parent out there, by the way.
Yeah.
But in the midst of you getting older, you're gaining knowledge through your experiences, which then in turn over time peel back the layers of your heart that opens you up, that now you actually become wise. And so it plays into your life now that, hey, you got like 77 grandkids. I don't know how many of my brothers and sisters they're given that. Yeah, it's like a pack of cats. Okay. They're just reproducing like crazy around here. Mom's got so many nieces. I've got so many nieces and nephews.
That's not very many.
That's a lot. Okay. Coming from a guy that has 0 kids, it's a lot to think of 10 of them. But I really want to hit on this one Bible verse, and that is Revelations 3:20. And God says, "Here I am. I'm knocking at the door. If anyone hears my voice, open up the door, and I will come in and eat with him, and he with me." And I think that right there is our calling to. He's there. He's waiting on us. Mm-hmm. It's just about us opening up that gate. That well, yeah, it's the door.
He's not forcing himself on us.
Yeah.
He has a boundary. I'm here. You just have to come in.
Exactly.
The door's open. You just have to come in.
And I think that's the most beautiful thing about boundaries is that everything is about free will.
Yes.
It's about individual responsibility. It's about you allowing this person into your life, but understanding where the good is at and where the bad is at.
Right.
And that once I allow God in, now I can subject myself to his word, and that teaches me what I really need, right? And I think that's probably one of the most important takeaways from it is that if I've accepted God, now I know what God desires of me.
Right.
And for me.
Right.
So now I'm allowing the good in. So let's get to this one, because this one's a good one. Number 3, the controller.
The controller.
Mm. Yeah. I think there's a lot of people that struggle with control in their lives. This one's going to be good. This one's going to be good.
Well, we talked earlier, and I said you thought I was a controller, but the more I read it, I go, no, I'm not. I'm not, in the sense that I'm really more compliant. And the other one, what was it?
Compliant and avoidant.
And avoidant. The controlling one is more like they manipulate. They're conniving. They're plotting against you, kind of thing. Where they don't take responsibility for their own doing. They always put it on somebody else. They use guilt statements, to make you do what they want you to do. Now, I'm not saying as a parent, I wasn't controlling in the sense that I'm going to break your arm if you don't do that.
Break my arm?
Yeah, remember when I used to say, I'm going to break your arm if you don't.
Yeah, you did. You used vulgar threats.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the reason why I said that you were controlling.
Yeah, because I would just lose it.
But what you wanted out of that, okay, is that you wanted to put fear upon me that I obey what you say.
Right.
And what you're using is something that I definitely don't want my arm to break.
No, but I never broke anybody's arm.
No, you never did. But see what results out of that too is if you make threats and eventually you're not taken serious.
Right. So you guys would push buttons even that much more. Mom didn't break my arm last time, so I could push it this time.
Thank God you never did. You probably wouldn't be my mom.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't even know you.
Maybe not. But controllers are those that their own personal life is out of control. They don't know themselves even. That it's easier for them to control someone else than it is for them to take care and responsibility for themselves.
Yeah, and right there, that's the key word is responsibility of oneself, because this person doesn't recognize their own fallacies, their own failures at this point. So what they're doing is they're trying to protect a potential failure without taking the responsibility to make sure something is successful. They do it by controlling, manipulating, and creating a aggressive type environment for a relationship. Right.
It's to me very toxic.
Yeah, this is the toxic ex that everybody talks about that was controlling in the past. It seems like everybody's got a toxic controlling ex, and like I don't know that there's 4 types here. I if I hear it from every single person, I just don't know how much validity there is to that.
And I kind of think too. This is something you really need to self-exam. When I hear that, that was when I was in the real dating scene. One of the first things I had to ask is, so tell me about your ex-wife.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to see what their response was on it. And if they came off with, they were witches or B-words or was very condescending, very hateful, I didn't really want to date that guy.
Exactly.
Because, in every relationship, I don't care what kind of relationship. Every relationship, there's 2 parties.
Yeah.
And both parties probably had just as much of a boundary issue as the other.
Right.
One not being able to say no, and the other one not being able to not be controlling. And
And I 100% agree with you. It's like me, when I'm asked that question, my response is always, my ex was absolutely phenomenal. She was a great woman. I made a lot of mistakes. And this is where men have a responsibility to accept everybody has a responsibility to accept their problems. But why, after it's over, do I need to talk down about this person? I don't care how bad a relationship was. There's always something in our imperfections that we did in that relationship as well.
Yeah,
and that's the only thing. That is the only thing that we can control is what we did. Right. So if my perspective after a relationship is over is solely negative and directed towards them, then I'm not taking responsibility for my own failures in that relationship.
Right.
I've been cheated on. I wouldn't say I've been emotionally abused, but it was I was in a very argumentative relationship that was very difficult. And then I was in a relationship where I was hiding a lot of things and not being 100% open.
Right. And each one of them came with its own baggage. And like you said, I can sit here and tell you all the list of things, and we'll just stick with your dad. He had a drinking problem. I don't know how many times I told him I was going to leave if he didn't quit. I never left. So whose boundary problem was that? That was my own boundary problem.
Yeah.
By me subjecting myself to that over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. His boundary problem was he wasn't hearing me. So we both had boundary problems. We both had issues, and I've often said this. I had just as many issues personally in my first marriage as I did my second marriage than the person that I was married to. I mean, it was a 2-way street all the way. So yeah, I kind of cringe when I hear someone really bash their ex when I don't ever hear them say, but I was at fault in this.
Yeah.
Because really, let's look at it. We all had some fault in failures.
I think it's the first time you're having that conversation. I think it's important that you speak highly of that person and you recognize your failures. That's the most important thing. Mm-hmm. It's because you're being humble. But as the relationship goes on, you can open up about the things that created baggage from that situation. But if you establish it in the beginning and not in a manipulative way, like a real way that you've dealt with the problems in the previous relationship, where you open up with, like, this is how things were going in that. And it's important that you communicate those things too, because that baggage, there's still some illicit baggage there. And you gotta open up about what that baggage is so that your new partner, the person that you're with, you guys can work on things together.
Well, I'll tell you what one of my biggest baggage is in every relationship is that I think I'm a God and that I can do whatever it's going to take for them to love me.
Yeah, Mom, you can't do that.
No, it's not my responsibility to. They either do or they don't. But in my sick, warped thinking was like with your dad. I loved your dad. And surely since I love him so much, he's going to change.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
Yeah, because it makes no sense.
And that's just admitting that evidently I think I'm God.
Yeah.
That I can love somebody enough to love me.
Yeah. But then there's this other type of person, right? That's all pretty much the aggressive person.
Yes.
There's the manipulative one.
Yes.
And where my mind went to first was the hypergamous wife, the woman that only marries because of money. Because what she is doing is she's using, potentially, the sexual control of the relationship to work things out with her rich husband to get her Louis Vuitton purse, to get her Ferrari, or whatever she desires from the finances. Well, he doesn't even have to be rich.
Just give me.
Yeah. Yeah. Give me all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But obviously, on the other end of that, the husband doesn't have any boundaries either because he can't say no.
Right. So who's the guilty party?
And see, so this is actually just as, in my opinion, just as toxic as a physical abuse relationship, because emotionally, this man on the other end of that isn't able to step up and say no, or because it comes back to that fear that if I say no, she's not going to love me anymore.
She's going to leave me.
She's not going to have sex with me anymore. She's not going to do this with me anymore. Blah, 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 blah. And I think, you can take from both of those examples of the aggressive and the manipulative one.
What it really shows us is just how off kilter our world is.
Yeah.
How we are totally so far from what God's plan was for us that it's difficult to find your way back.
Yeah.
It is. We just keep putting this baggage on ourselves.
Yeah.
And there's freedom. There's freedom in giving that to the Lord and letting God lead you in the way you should be. And let's talk about that. We have one more, the unresponsive, I think. Have we looked at the unresponsive?
The avoidant.
No, that was the avoidant, but we don't. An unresponsive person, like, I don't care what you say kind of thing, that you totally avoid their emotions.
That's a subsection to avoidant.
Oh, okay. So I just remembered, that unresponsive, how many times did I say this myself? Well, I don't care what you think about that. You're going to do this.
Yeah.
Where I was putting my thoughts in there.
Excuse me. It was the fourth one was the non-responsive. My bad.
Okay. I thought there was a non-responsive one that where they just, not only do they not even have boundaries for themselves, is that they don't respect anybody else's boundaries. Yeah. They just don't hear it. They just don't hear it.
Why?
I think sometimes if you look at unresponsive, I think they're kind of narcissistic. And they've got their head so wrapped around themselves that they don't notice what's going on the outside.
They're so self-absorbed that they can't recognize the issues in their own life. Yeah.
Yeah, they can't recognize it. Yeah. And I think those, personally, I think that those are even really just as hard as those that are, what's the second one? Compliant and the...
Mom, you're making me refer back to...
I know. Sorry about that. But, I think that they are very difficult to reach.
Yeah.
Because they've become so self-absorbed in their own thoughts and actions that they can't see anything outside of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
All of them have bad things. All four of them have, and we go back to the gate thing. We've got to learn how to get rid of the bad and open for the good. But like you said, without Jesus, I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, me either.
You know?
Also, understand this too, that in these 4 different character traits, that they are also fluid. Like that we may take some aspects of the avoidant, even though I'm the controller or whatever. I'm not the controller. That's not me. But you may take aspects of each one and apply it differently in different aspects and relationships in your own life. It's not, it's too often. And I really want to say this, and I want to say it on every stinking episode because this is really kind of the purpose is that we tear down walls. Okay. Mm-hmm. Tear down walls, look at them subjectively from the outside to understand that everything in life is very subjective. And the only way to truly find truth, to pursue it, is that in the pursuit, we are looking at everything open-minded while guarding our hearts with Christ.
Right.
But yeah, they're also critical of the other person, right? Like, oh, I didn't like the way you put on your makeup today. I didn't like this. I don't like that.
We're just critical in life in general, not even maybe arrowed at anybody, but everything that practically comes out of their mouth is a critical kind of comment. Mm-hmm. Like nothing is good.
Right.
And those kind of people are, for me, are exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're exhausting to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, why don't you have any positivity? Why is there nothing that's good? Why are you so critical? Like, what inside of you is so negative that you haven't dealt with that you have to show negativity to everybody and everything around you?
Well, I think the root of it is resentment.
Yeah.
I think the root of it is bitterness. Mm-hmm. Something along their way hurt them deeply enough to turn that resentment and bitter, and they become very critical people.
Yeah.
It's sad. One of the things too about the chapter that I talked about and what Scripture says is that we are not responsible for people's feelings, behaviors, and attitudes, but we are responsible to people.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? To people?
Well, Scripture tells us that letting out the bad and the good in. I can't control you, Levi. I have no power over you in your emotions, in your choices of attitude, and in your behavior.
Right.
We all think we can control you.
Yeah.
Or you think, like for instance, I'm going to use Brock for an example because Brock's a good one between me and him. When that point of time came in our lives, so when he was out of prison and stuff, and I was trying to make amends and stuff, and I was saying, I'm sorry for the screw up I did in raising you and stuff like that, and we exchanged those feelings of, forgiveness, and letting go. But Brock still had some issues sometimes,
right? And
he would throw something up to me that I did, and I would look at him and I go, I've asked for forgiveness, and you accepted that forgiveness. That's dead and buried. I'm no longer responsible for that with you. If you're still upset, that's on you, not on me. You have to take ownership of that emotion. I can't make you mad. You allow yourself to get mad.
So what you're saying is that in a situation like that, you're responsible to apologize.
Yes, that was my responsibility, was to make amends.
Or on the other end, it's your responsibility to forgive.
Yes. And that's it. That is making the amends, is asking for forgiveness. It's their choice if they want to forgive me or not. And if they don't want to forgive, then that's on them, not on me.
Perfect example of you not having control of them, but you have control of what you can do.
What I do. Right. I have a responsibility to you as a human being.
Right.
And my responsibility to you as a human being is to treat you with respect, treat you with kindness.
Right.
Love you. But I have no control over you.
Okay, here, this is a little bit off topic, but I want your take on this. And last thing, I got one last thing to close everything up on. But I want your opinion. Is respect given or is respect earned?
I do believe it's an earned.
You do?
I think that there is a level of, I think there's two kinds of respect here.
Uh-huh.
There is a respect that we just have in general for people we should have, just a respect. That's not necessary to the person. That's just the kind of person I am.
Right.
But if you do something to step on that, it's my free will whether I'm going to open my door for you to come in and smack me again.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
So that is the point where respect has to be re-earned or earned.
Yeah.
I'm going to respect you when I first meet you and I don't know anything about you. I'm going to show you respect. But if you open that door and you do wrong, you're going to have to work to get it back.
Right.
And that's where the earning the respect comes.
And I think, so I've been asked this question a bunch of times and I think about it and I can't make a definitive answer on it. I literally cannot make a definitive answer. Respect is given and respect is earned. It's both. Yeah. It goes both ways. It's a give and take. Like, but again, kind of like what I hit on just a little bit earlier is like we want to, it's either A or B and it's so black and white. But the reality is that respect goes both ways. I respect this person because I know that it's my duty to respect them. Now, once they no longer respect me and they don't reciprocate that respect, now do I continually respect them and being naive? No. So then they have to earn back my respect.
But does that mean you treat them terribly? Does that mean that you're hateful to them? Does that mean that you can backtalk them?
Maybe it's the lying girlfriend. Maybe it's the lying boyfriend, whatever. Maybe it's that person that's continually lying. I have to see over an extended amount of time that this person is reestablishing the trust within the relationship so that I can respect their word. Right. But in the meantime, it doesn't mean that I am constantly nagging them and trying to tear them down. No, I'm still loving them and being able to communicate that, hey, I'm still struggling here because this happened. I'm not trying to start a fight. But, I just want to communicate to you.
I want to be vulnerable on this. If I'm going to do this podcast and you want to, your whole stand on this is truth.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, we have a situation in our family.
Yeah.
Okay. And that situation is that I don't agree with their choice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does not mean that I can't love them. Right. Doesn't mean that I don't even like them. Right. I like them. I love them. Mm-hmm. I just don't have to agree with their choice.
Yeah.
And whatever it is that is not inconducive to my own spirit, I don't have to like it. Mm-hmm. But I am going to treat them with respect, and I'm going to treat them with kindness and stuff. They haven't broken a mistrust with me, per se, you know? But what irritates me about this situation, and any situation like this, is what is wrong with society that we can't have a difference of opinion but can't still respect each other?
Because empathy and compassion is the most virtuous thing that somebody can carry in today's culture. That agreeableness is the most important thing that a person can carry. That disagreements and saying no is a problem in today's culture. And this is the reason why boundaries is so stinking important, because especially with a situation like this is a spiritual issue that you feel led that you can't say yes to this. This is the reason why when we raise our children, we shouldn't raise them to only say yes. We should raise them to be bold leaders within our communities so that as we move forward into the next generation, that these children recognize that I need to put my foot down and see where I need to say no, so that the betterment of our culture becomes to where we start establishing truth again.
Yeah, I agree. You know, but it's difficult. Like you said, it's difficult for me. I want to be argumentative here, and I know there's no point in arguing.
Yeah.
I know where my heart's at, and my heart is not to do anything evil or shameful or hurtful. I just have my line drawn in the sand at how much I'm willing to compromise and what I'm not willing to compromise on. And I feel like that, you know, in our today's society, nobody can have an opinion of their own or a value or a moral that they will not cross. And yet, the thing is, as Christians, we all are sinners. Even after accepting Christ, you're still going to sin because we're in our human nature, and we will not be perfect until the time of my death. And I'm resurrected with Christ. That's how I feel. So that doesn't mean that I don't sin, but I don't invite people to join in my sin.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And that's you establishing the boundary, right?
Yes.
I think we'll close up right here.
Okay.
A functional boundary is us having the ability to speak truth with whom we are in a relationship with.
Mm-hmm. Any relationship.
And you using that as an example is a perfect representation of that. You know what the truth is. You know how you feel. You know what to say no on. And you're saying, I'm not going to partake in it with you.
Right.
And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be okay with saying no.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say, Mother?
No, it's a deep subject, and I really encourage people to dig in. If your life feels out of control, or you feel like you're not being heard, read the book. Start practicing it. Just take small steps, and each little victory that you see that, like I said, that first time I told that guy, my kids aren't seeing that movie. Yeah. That was a turning point for me that I can really use my voice and express what where I'm coming from. Yeah. And again, I'm going to reiterate, learn to use the I word. If somebody is crossing your boundary, if you want to communicate, I feel when this happens, this is how I feel when this happens. Do not go, when you do this.
Exactly. The you is the problem because it's accusatory.
Yes. Yeah. And that person's going to become protected.
And I tell you what, that right there, that takes practice.
Yes.
It takes a lot of practice to where you're not accusing, where you're doing it, I feel, I think,
Yeah.
Because you're owning the responsibility when you say I. You're projecting responsibility when you say you.
Right. And so, take the responsibility and say, I felt this when this situation happened. Mm-hmm. And,
again, the book is Boundaries by Cloud Townsend. It's like, probably has sold over 1 million copies by now. I mean, you got that in like 91 and it had 600,000.
Over 600,000 copies. And this was 20 some years ago. And, and if you got to get down to particulars, he did do a book on dating, boundaries in dating,
right?
Boundaries in the marriage, boundaries with raising children.
Yeah. So this is pretty much just the
kind of overviews of all of it.
Right.
And we're going to talk about that next time is, how our families were structured and how boundaries got lost in that. Mm-hmm. I touched a little bit on that when I said my growing up years was just, there was no structure.
Yeah.
So there was no boundaries.
Well, and I think for a listener, they may be listening and it's like, oh, well, you talked about that last week. I think the important thing to take away from the conversations that we're having is that we're applying experiences with our own lives that then actually have played out and where we've gained wisdom. And I think too is that you're going to be able to pull little nuggets of gold out of the conversation that we're having.
I hope so. I mean, that's ultimately our goal. And I want to be as open and vulnerable as I can be, just simply because I screw up so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I screw up all the time, and thank God for Jesus. And thank God for forgiveness, and owning up to it. Nothing is better than to go to my kids and say, man, I screwed up and I'm sorry. I mean, my kids, I think you respect me more because I can do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Alrighty, guys. Well, make sure that you subscribe on YouTube if you enjoyed the quality this time. I know the last episode wasn't that great of quality. The lighting wasn't good, whatever. This time, I really put in the effort to make sure it was good for you guys on YouTube. Also, if you are listening to this on Apple Podcast, at the bottom of the description is a link to leave a review. I would appreciate it. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, that's going to be crucial into allowing these very important conversations that we are having to grow and reach new people that maybe need to hear this message. Please share it on your social medias as well. Share the link. If you have questions, reach out to us. We will discuss with you. We will have a conversation with you. We appreciate all the feedback that we get here and on on Spotify, please leave a rating on there. Hopefully it's not a 1-star. Hopefully we at least make 2, but it's okay.
Yeah.
It's whatever you think. I just want the feedback. And thank you guys very much for tuning in to episode 3 of Boundaries. Remember, in 2 weeks is the next episode.
2 weeks.
God bless. Thank you guys.
Thank you.